Good morning, everyone. I think we'll kick off this morning. We've not got everyone on the line yet, but I'm anticipating that they might be joining in the next few minutes. So we will kick off. Welcome to the first 50 Acres Academy event, which is the first of one of many of our webinars that we'll be running in coming months. So we'll keep you posted on all of those as they are scheduled. But today we are talking about social media for not-for-profits. So it's a topic that's very close to my heart, and it's one that I'm very passionate about, and it's one that I speak a lot about to our clients. And as many of you probably know, 50 Acres has a lot of does a lot of work in the not-for-profit space. So it's a topic that is very, very close to us and we're very passionate about. There'll be plenty of opportunities for questions through the session. We'll have two pauses, two periods where we can ask questions, one in the middle and one at the end. So with your toolbar, your control panel, you should be able to enter questions in it, in the little line that says questions. You just write them in, and I'll go in there and I'll see what those questions are, and hopefully we'll have time to answer all of them. If we don't get to all of them, I will respond to you offline and respond to you either directly via an email or put up a response generally to the group. So we will get to everyone's questions. Please be rest assured of that. So let's kick off this morning. And as I said, it's a topic that is I'm very passionate about. But essentially, one of the things that we're going to cover off today is how to make it meaningful. It's really important to make it meaningful. How do you do it? One of the things that I'm also very passionate about is don't let it take over your life. And tweeting and being on Facebook isn't everything, and it shouldn't dominate your life. And it is very easy for it to do that. So how do you stop that happening? And as I said before, there's plenty of time for questions. So let's kick off. Why is social media important? Well, it's here to stay. It's an extraordinary amount of information and knowledge that's circulating, and it's part of every part of our lives. I mean, how many times a day do you reach for your mobile phone just to search something that I don't know how some of you probably aren't as old as I am, but I can remember days where I didn't have a mobile phone to get that information just at the tip of my fingertips. So we are now able to get extraordinary amounts of information. We're able to send a tweet or connect with a politician or another stakeholder, an important person to our organisation on Facebook or Twitter. We're able to ask them questions. We think that they should be duty-bound to respond to us. So, it's an extraordinary development that we've had in the last 10 years. And as I say to people, the first iPhone came on the market the year that Kevin Rudd was elected, and, notwithstanding what you think of that period of our history, it's not that long ago. So, these things have happened very, very quickly, and it really is being very impactful. And how do we think we're going to deal with it? It's something that we all need to think about, really. So, as I said before, it is something that we do need to pause and think about and make meaningful. And we'll think about that a little bit as well as we go through. But making sure that the passion and the drive of you personally and your organisation comes through in everything you do in terms of social media is really important, so that people know that you're not just scheduling 5 posts a day and there's nothing behind those. That they need to show your passion and your drive and what's behind, what's driving you in terms of what you're doing. So, as I mentioned before, we're all permanently connected to the internet. I often ask people a question in workshops that I do, put your hands up if it's the first thing you do before you get out of bed. is reach across and grab your phone, and check your emails and check Facebook or check whatever it is that you check. We all are guilty of doing it, and you can read all this stuff about how the best thing is to leave it on the kitchen table or out in the lounge room. But so often that doesn't happen, and it is very much part of our lives. But we do need to consciously think, I think, about how and when and what we contribute. Otherwise, we stay switched on, and that's not good for us. It's not good for our own health and our own mental health. It's not good for our organisation. It's not good for our families, and it's not good for the people that we work with, day to day. So I think for all those reasons, we need to have a think about what we're doing. It was a great piece, actually, that if any of you ever read this journal, Meanjin, it's just a good journal that has, interesting stuff in it. Catherine Murphy is a journalist who is a friend of mine here in Parliament House, and it's a great quote. There is no going back. It's not something that we chose. We didn't have a conversation about this and the pros and the cons. The shift has been, amazing and iterative, and we've upgraded and we've experimented and we've early adopted our way through it. We still don't really know where we're going with it, but we all know that it's here to stay. And if any of you've got kids, you know how fast they are adopting and doing things online. So it is very important that we need to think about what we're doing. So why? It can spark engagement. It's fast and it's free for not-for-profits. That's one of the main drivers. It's a no-brainer for you as organisations. So it's really important for you that you harness all of those opportunities that social media brings. And the fact that it's free, the fact that you can communicate with your stakeholders, the fact that you can communicate with your members through it, through different forums, different platforms. We'll go through some of those later. So it's not just about Twitter and Facebook. There's lots of other ways you can think about social media and online communication. So, but one of the drivers is the incredible speed and the incredible cost savings that comes from it, which is just goes without question. And as organisations, I think we run the risk of becoming relevant if we don't do it properly. So, I think that's very important that I am often asked when I've gone in and helped an organisation set up a Twitter account and a Facebook account for a campaign or whatever it is, who are literally just putting their toe in the water and going, we're just going to get started here. And we set up a Twitter account and, a week later, the CEO of the industry body or the organisation says to me, I've only got 32 followers on Twitter. Why? Why don't I have a lot more? And I went, well, I explained to them it's a gradual process. We're not all Lady Gaga. We don't all overnight have, a million followers. And so it's something that, even Lady Gaga, I'm sure, had a day when she had 32 followers. So, it's one of those things that you do develop over time and, you grow and it grows with you, and it's about how you use it and how you increase that growth in terms of your communication. So we'll think about how we do that just in a moment. So what are the key reasons? Well, the community expects us to. Your members, your stakeholders, the people that you're regularly communicating with expect you to be communicating online. It's increasingly the way that we're doing it, and it's very important that you get with the story really. And I'm really surprised often when I do not-for-profit conferences or gatherings, and I ask, there's 50 people in the room, and I ask people to put their hands up and say who is doing this stuff, who is actually who's got a Twitter account, who's got a Facebook account. And I'm absolutely flabbergasted when I see organisations that have got 150 staff that have got the Twitter and the Facebook account sitting there, but they're dormant. They've got no content in them. They've said, we just don't know what to do with it, or the board's really scared. And, they've been given us the free rein to do it. So, it's about, not just dipping your toe in the water. It's about setting it up properly. It's about, doing all of the things that will make it work for you in a way that you can resource it properly. So we'll talk about resourcing in a little while, but it's about obviously getting on board. There's obviously obvious productivity gains. We talked about that a little second ago, but it's for both your own workforce, your own organisation, and assisting your own community and your stakeholder groups, and it helps you be more efficient in the way you do that. And as I mentioned before, it makes absolute clear financial sense. You can communicate faster, cheaper, and greener. So, really, why wouldn't you do it? It's just an obvious one to be grabbing hold of. So what do you need to do? Well, we need to think about three things, and we will go through them, and some other stuff as well. Resources. You need to think about your audiences, and we'll also cover off blogging, because very many organisations are also doing that as well as part of what they're doing, either as a separate blog or as part of their website, or perhaps as individuals. So I'm sure some of you are doing that already, and so we'll have a think about blogging as well. So how do you resource it? Well, so often, I think one of the things that really sort of slightly puts the panic into people is that, they go out and they grab hold of every single asset. They'll set up a Tumblr account, a Flickr account, a Pinterest account, a Twitter account, a Facebook account, a LinkedIn account, a LinkedIn page, a LinkedIn, organisation page. They'll set it all up, and then they'll look around them and they'll go, oh my goodness, I've got an Instagram, I've got all this stuff, and how will I manage it? So it's really about making sure that you've got set up what you can manage as an organisation or as a person. So if you're here today to think about this on a personal level, there's obviously only so much time in the day. You've got a life and you've got other stuff to do. You've got to work, you've got a family, you might want to go to the gym occasionally, or whatever you do. You might want to sleep. So there's some other stuff that you need to think about in your own life. And obviously you need to be able to do all that stuff as well. So as an individual, think about what's actually more effective. I mean, I did a webinar last week for Women's Agenda just on this topic, about as individuals and as, it was for women, but as people, how do you manage social media in terms of, and how do you harness it for your career? And what I said, my mantra is always really just do where you think as individuals, where you think your audience will be. So if you're trying to connect with a certain group and you know that they're on Instagram, or they're more likely to be on Twitter because they're more intellectual and academic, think about specialising and focusing on those platforms rather than spreading yourself too thin. But we'll think about the platforms in a minute specifically. But obviously each platform lends itself to a certain strength. So LinkedIn is great for careers, career development, being there so people can find you and make you offers and put forward. You can put forward job bids and opportunities and all those sorts of things. Facebook is great to connect to groups as well as an individual. I mean, as a company, we have both a company Facebook account and I have a personal account, and I often share similar content on both, but they're different. So my personal stuff, I won't share most of that on my company and company account, though I will put on the personal probably most of the time. So there's really different ways of looking at it as an individual. As an organisation, it's very different. It really depends on how many people you've got to do this stuff. So, if you've got, a dedicated resource in-house, 2 or 3 or 1 or however many people to do social media, then really think about how you're going to resource it and really spend some time working that out. And rather than, don't necessarily sort of pointing the finger at the person in the corner who's got the communications hat on, think as an organisation, how will we resource it, holistically? How will we all roll our sleeves up and get involved? I mean, I've done a lot of workshops with not-for-profits about how as organisations they can be thinking about their social media activity, and it's not a silo. Organisations need content. You need content to be able to post and put out. So you very often, if you're the communications person in the corner with the social media, half the time, you need to call upon your colleagues to get that content. So you need to be able to draw those people in. So it's a collaborative effort, and you need to think about it in that way. So having a think about how you're going to best do that would be good. So to get started, this is assuming that you're an organisation that perhaps is really just tentatively thinking about this stuff, or really are just taking baby steps at the moment. So the first thing I always think you need to do is define what you want to achieve, and then think about what you need to do to make that happen around that. So whether that's a group of the staff sitting down for an hour's discussion or a 2-hour discussion or whatever that is, if you have a regular weekly planning meeting or a regular fortnightly or monthly planning meeting, dedicate some time to social media. And it often will fall out of communications, but there's a whole new set of thinking around it as well. It needs to be integrated with your communications efforts, absolutely. So it shouldn't be standing alone, but there's a whole lot of new stuff that you need to be thinking about. So have a think about it in the context of the normal planning you do. And also develop some protocols to guide your activity, because so often, you hear of organisations who, only one person's got access to sending tweets out, or, it's got to be approved by X, Y, or Z, or whatever else. So have a think about how that's going to work so that it can be as fast and as responsive as you need. So if you're a big organisation with a lot of comments coming in, getting every tweet authorised by 1 or 2 people is very cumbersome. So, you need to think about how you're going to make that work to make that, run as smoothly as possible, because ultimately you've heard people say it's about the conversation. Well, it is. I often describe social media as being in a really, really big party, in a really big room, big, huge room, and it's all quite pleasant. It's all quite calm. It's not a crazy, dance party. And there's lots of different groups of people in different spaces in that room. And so you've got, a little community of, your stakeholders in one area, and then another group of stakeholders in another area. They're all talking to each other. And you can, move from group to group, or you can stand in the corner and observe them and listen in to the conversations as you're moving around, or you can move around and join in with those little groups of conversations as you go around. Or you can stand in the middle and shout, which often some people do with social media. They sort of sit there. When you get hold of it, you go, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I can just sit here and tweet all day. And quite often I think standing in the middle room, standing on a table in the middle of the room and shouting is often not the best way of doing it. It's, I think people then switch off and go, oh, can't you just go? Because it is about having a discussion. If you're in a party and you're starting to shout at someone, people don't generally want to talk to you. So thinking about it in that way, I think, is often a good way of doing it. So in terms of resourcing it, investing in your staff. So if you're an organisation, making sure that you're investing in the staff. Is that a half a day resource a week? Is it a half-time resource? Is it a full-time resource? What does that look like for you? Is it just part of someone's role? But what does that actually mean? Because if you just I have so often seen organisations who've said, oh, this is the communications person and they also are responsible for social media, but we're not quite sure what that sort of really ends up looking like. It's actually better if you quantify that sort of within the group or within the organisation, I think, and being honest about what you think you can manage as a person or as an individual or as an organisation, and coming clean with that. So you can say, well, look, realistically, I can do 3 hours a week. Realistically, I can do half a day. What can I achieve in that half a day as a communications person in a not-for-profit? I often say as a person, yes, I'll flunk off on Facebook quite often, and I'm sure many of you do, but as the actual doing stuff, the actual sending stuff out on social media, I reckon I get that done in about an hour a week, including the stuff for our company. So, I think as an organisation, if it's a small to medium not-for-profit, you can probably get away with, half to a full day a week. Obviously more is great, but you don't want to be tweeting people and sending posts out every couple of hours because people will just tune off. So I think you need to think about how that works, and you need to, the budget and allocation of resources needs to run in line with your goals. So, if your ambition is to, you're running a campaign in January or next June and it's a national campaign and you want to reach every Australian, well, you've got some way to go to get there. So you really do actually have to, think about, how you're going to get there, because you're not going to get there by yourself. You're probably only going to get there if you're going to reach out to a whole lot of other organisations that will then retweet your content, and other individuals who've got big followings, and reach out to them, both reaching out to them on Twitter, but also perhaps emailing or even calling them if there's an individual that has a great, strong following, and saying, would you mind retweeting our content from time to time about this thing, or whatever that is. So you need to think about how small or how large it is that you're trying to, sort of achieve, and in what time frame. I think that's really important. So the other thing you need to be able to do is have the flexibility to respond and inform, and shaping the engagement around what you actually need rather than around what you think you might need. You're looking at the next guy, you're looking at the guys down the road and you're thinking, oh, look at them, they're doing all this stuff. But, they might be an organisation of 123 and you're an organisation of 33 or 32 or whatever. And you go, well, there's no way we're at that capacity. We're no way we don't have that membership. We don't have that money, budget. We don't have the capacity. So that's got to be in line with where you are right now, as an organisation or as an individual, before you actually sort of grab hold of it and go for it. So the thing I think that's really important is making sure that you get the details right, because there's nothing worse than, sending a tweet out with a link that doesn't work. How often have you seen that, and how often is that frustrating? So, how often have you seen a tweet that's spelt wrongly, and, no one's perfect, but, getting those sorts of things right, I think, is really important. So you need to spend some time about, where in what amount you're going to deploy those resources. You need to set expectations about how much you're willing to spend, about, doing things like, setting up all your accounts. We work with organisations and a lot, and we often advise them, if they're doing, for example, a new website or they're rebranding or whatever they're doing, to get their design company or design agency or design person, graphic person in-house or wherever they are, to actually do that setup of the Twitter and the Facebook, because when they put the skin in there and make it all look sort of pretty and nice, they inevitably do it better, a little bit better than you or I could do it. But, if you've got some basic graphic skills, you can do that. But making sure those sorts of things look sort of good is really important, so that it represents what you are and what your organisation is. So either you as an individual or represents, your organisation. So, I think it's very, the thing that is important is, the amazing gains that can be made just by being so obsessive about the small things. So, really studying the form guide and the science behind fundraising and the size of buttons and where they need to be on the page, and how you motivate people when they go to your website to donate, or how you motivate people to to click that button and send an email to the MP or whatever it is that you're doing, whatever your call to action is, how do you motivate people to take that action? That's really important. So really studying the form guide to making sure that those things you get right and they look good, and that those details are really, you've really nailed it, because it is important. If people come onto your website and they can't find where to go and it looks messy and it looks sort of tatty, then they'll just switch off, because there's a whole lot of other people and there's a whole lot of other noise out there that they could be listening to, and so they'll just stop listening to you. So I think it is important to get that stuff right. So resourcing. You need to be ambitious, but it needs to be manageable. I mean, I always say to people, be audacious, be gutsy, be ambitious, because if you're not ambitious, no one's going to be ambitious on your behalf. Either as an individual, if you're here today because you're interested in your own individual social media presence and stuff, or as an organisation. No one's going to do it for you. You've got to take hold of it. You've got to grab hold of it and really make it sing. So I think it does take time and resources to make it work. As it does, with talking to journalists and building a media profile, a PR profile for your organisation. It takes time to make that stuff work. So, sort of be resigned to that. But literally be as ambitious as you want. If you want to go out there and you want to drive a following that tries to touch, pretty much most people in Australia, and you want to start something that's really big, go for it. Think that and go out there and dream it and try and make it happen, which I think's a great thing. You need to set expectations in line with your resources, but as I say, be bold and consider the opportunities of investing in social media. I think it is a good investment. It's not just an add-on. It's a necessity these days. It's not just nice to have anymore. It's an absolute must-have, and you must think about how you're going to invest in that. So, if you've got, someone who is a communications person and you've got their full time, they should be able to spend a reasonable amount of their time driving this stuff for you, or if you're here today listening and you're the communications person, you should be able to think about it. It needs to be integrated with your other communications and marketing efforts, completely integrated. If it's not integrated, you're not doing it right. But if you're thinking about it holistically, the content that you use in marketing material for your members and for your stakeholders is the content that you use, to a similar extent to the media, and then in social media, obviously with some revisions for those different platforms. But that content can be reflected in all those different areas, and so I think it's really important to make sure that it is totally integrated and well resourced. Investing in people that can manage the program and giving them the authority to develop and post content in a really responsive way. As I said before, if you're running something and then people, you're finding that it's going off and you're sitting there and you've got to get approval, and I have absolutely met organisations who've had to get stuff approved every tweet. You can imagine what a killjoy that is in terms of that sort of conversation. It doesn't happen. It stops. And so you need to be able to have someone or people who've got the authority to do it. But if you don't, it really does, stop dead really in many respects, that sort of the excitement and the energy that happens. So look, we'll pause now for any questions. I've got a couple. I don't have anything at the moment. I had someone who dropped out and then has come back in. If anyone's got a question, if you want to pop it in now, otherwise I'll look there in a second and I'll come back. But no one's popped in anything for the moment, so I will keep going, I think. So we've got another we're about halfway through. So if you've got any questions, maybe start to pop them in, and we'll get to them in about 20, 25 minutes or something like that. So the next area that we need to think about is how you speak to your audiences. So we've thought about how you resource it and how you get started, but how do you actually go out there and speak to the audiences once you've decided this is what you're going to do? You're really embracing this stuff. So, in terms of, if anyone who says that you can conduct your life online and be gadget-led's wrong. But, I actually think that it's, in terms of audiences and what you do, it's probably, if you're a small organisation, it's probably better to limit yourself to 2 types of social networking and doing them well, than having, as I said before, a whole bunch of platforms and not doing them well at all, and never having any content to post on them. So I think in terms of audiences, doing something well is better than not doing it, or doing too much stuff and not doing it very well. So in terms of your audiences, what do you need to consider? The first thing you need to think about is, how do we want to engage? So, how are we going to do it? Are we going to limit ourselves to Twitter and Facebook? Do we also, is what we're doing very visual, and so it lends itself to having a Pinterest account or an Instagram account? And bearing in mind that an Instagram account can be completely integrated into Twitter and Facebook. So when probably many of you have got Instagram accounts, and so you may already know that when you post to Instagram, you can just link it and it can just be uploaded to Twitter and Facebook immediately. So those sort of visual mediums can be spread in different ways. The next thing you need to think about is, what do we want to say? So what's your motivation? What is your sorry, I'm just sorry, I think I'm just looking at someone who's saying they've got their hand raised. Oh, Denise has got her hand raised. I'm not quite sure. Denise, if you've got a question, Denise, just perhaps pop it in the question section and I'll get to it, if that's okay. So, what do we want to say? There's obviously different people that you're speaking to, different people about potentially different things. You might have different audiences, slightly different audiences, different stakeholder groups that you're speaking to with a slightly different message, or even potentially, separate, very different messages. So you need to think about that, and that's part of your communications effort overall. But it's also very much, thinking about how you're going to communicate that in social media. So I think that's important. So what platform should we use? A lot of people say to me, last week I was doing the Women's Agenda webinar, and people said, do we need to do a Flickr account? Do we need a, Tumblr account? Do we need to do Pinterest and, whatever? Well, you can do it all if you can resource it. I mean, we have a Pinterest account. I upload stuff to it maybe every couple of weeks. It's not that active. I've got a couple of hundred people who I engage with there. It's a sort of visual medium. We're a communications company. Yes, we can communicate what we do in a visual way if we want, but it is a platform that I grabbed hold of, but it's not a platform that I'm particularly active on as a company. Where we are active, though, as an organisation or as a company, is Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. So I think one of the areas that you can think of, LinkedIn as an organisation is a really, really good way of, you can set up your own group there if you're not already doing that. If you're in a particular sector, you could set up a sector group. You can join other groups and then sort of proselytize to those groups about your group, letting them know that it's there. I mean, when I first started this agency, I think I had a couple of hundred people that I connected with on LinkedIn, and now I have about 5,000. It is quite viral, and what happens is you sort of get a couple of people who are, if you have a couple of really good contacts, then it just sort of does explode. So I did some work for Ozfilm, for example, the Australian film body, and I now have a couple hundred people in the film industry who connect to me. And my philosophy with LinkedIn is, if they don't look completely strange and they're not going to sort of look like they're sort of about to murder me for whatever reason, and I'm sure you all had LinkedIn requests that you're wondering, who is this person, like what possibly would they want to be connecting with me. I will connect with them if they're in a not-for-profit, or if they're in a company, or if they're a communications person, or whatever. And the majority of the people that I connect with are in those spaces. And so for me, it's a good platform to be able to, when I put out something to my network, I've got 1,000+ people on Twitter. I've got 5,000 on LinkedIn. I've got a group, a LinkedIn group that I've set up about not-for-profit communications, and I'm a member of a number of other groups. So if I really want to do a shout out about something, I can be shouting out to probably 7,000 people, plus our own database that we have as a company. I can be shouting out to sort of 10, 12,000 people, which is effective for us. So having a think about how you use LinkedIn, I think, is a really good way to start. It's a really good platform, and it is something that you should think about. But as well as that, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, I think, are really good go-to ones as well. How often should we engage? Well, as I say to people, you can engage as much as you really think you can when you've got something to say. And if you don't have anything to say, there's no point in just saying stuff and, if there's nothing behind it. So I think it's important to make sure that you've got real content. And yes, you can repeat tweets. It's often said that only 20% of the people that you're engaging with on Twitter or Facebook are actually seeing what you're posting. So that means that, you need to repost something a few times to get a lot more of your audience to see what you're saying. So, and you're never going to get through to all of them, because some of them are going to be switched off, some of them are going to be, on holidays, some of them are going to be asleep, some whatever. So, it really, and it's also about the timing, about when you should engage as well. So, if you know that your audience is, up early, up late, watching Lateline, whatever they're doing, you need to think about the timing of when you put out those tweets or those posts as well. And the other thing you can think about also is boosting posts. Twitter is a very expensive platform to boost a post or to advertise on, some thousands of dollars. But Facebook Facebook and LinkedIn are a much more accessible platform to advertise on. So as organisations, certainly have a look at that as an option, I think. And you can certainly either boost a post or boost your own organisation or your own organisation's page. You see that all the time on Facebook. So that's something that to really consider. Another thing you need to think about is, what role should we play in the conversation? Are you informing? Are you just commenting? Are you driving a discussion? Are you part of a discussion? So you need to have a think about the role that you have, I think, in that organisation as well, in that conversation as well. So in terms of what you need to do before you start identifying your audience, in terms of the planning, you need to think about, it needs to be targeted. It needs to be relevant for your audiences for it to work. You need to define what you're going to achieve by using social media, and you need to develop a really deliberate tactics to help you achieve those goals. So, is that a target of doing 10 posts a week, 5 posts a week, 2 posts a day. What does that look like? So, it needs to be, those parameters should be put in place by, developing a strategy or a plan, and those protocols, but also include crisis management. So when you have something that's happening and people are asking you questions, you've probably all heard of, some negative stuff happening on social media, and you may have been victim to it or seen it firsthand, but you need to think about how you would deal with that if it happened to you. So, and I often say to people, I've written crisis communications plans, and it's very hard to plan for every crisis. It's impossible, because when a crisis happens, you don't normally know that it's going to happen. So that's the nature of a crisis. So, it's about sitting down and thinking, if something went wrong, one of our staff, something happened with the staff, something happened with something that we were doing as an organisation, whatever it was, how would we deal with it? Who would be responsible for sitting down and working out the response? Who would be responsible for the first comment, whether that's to the media or to the members or to stakeholders or on social media? Who would be responsible for doing that? And how would you organise that? Is it the board? Is it the executive? Is it the, whatever? How does that work? So how do you talk to people? Well, as I think I said in the very, very first slide, it needs to be meaningful. It's the importance of, building and honouring the relationships that you have should inform everything that you do. And, I don't know about you, but I've formed some really good friendships that I've then extended to outside of social media via social media. I'm sure some of you have as well. And, if you're being true to yourself and true to your organisation, and if you're an individual doing this stuff, then you can be yourself and you can be personal. You obviously don't want to tell them about every green smoothie you have every morning, but you can be honest about what you're doing, and bring some humour and some light and some personal details into it. Obviously, not too many. So people need to understand the value of engaging with you as a person, and even as an organisation. You need to have a personality. And if you're just delivering content that is straight and, boring and cleansed and tedious and repetitive, then people are going to see that for what it is. They're going to switch off. So you need to bring life and, whatever that tone is that you adopt. I mean, every organisation has a different culture. Every organisation has a different tone. But, I'm not saying you make a joke of what you're doing. It's never funny if you're helping people that are in trouble or poor or, victims or whatever it is. That's not funny at all. But, there is about bringing humanity and a tone into your communications that show what you're doing and display your passion, both as an organisation and as individuals. It's very important. So really thinking about that. So it needs to be clear. This means that, execution, as I said before, is a very important factor. The nitty-gritty of getting the copyright, the design, the timing, making it look good is really important. It's a very important step, but it's not whacking anything up there that's sort of a logo that doesn't really quite fit the space or whatever it is. In terms of your Facebook or your Twitter page, it really does need to look good. So it needs to, and you need to make sure that your communication is clear, authentic, and compelling. And, people will talk back to you. They will. They're people. They're real people at the other end of the phone. There's a whole bunch of people that I'm talking to now, and, you've got to remember that you are actually talking to people. So that's a very important thing. So communicate the small stuff, not just the big picture, encouraging feedback and being responsive, keeping it personal, as I said before. Using pictures or links to videos, so important that you do that. And there's so much evidence there that indicates that linking to creating links, giving away content, using pictures and videos is really important to drive people to click on your link, and encouraging your staff and community, your stakeholders, your members, your board, your staff, your team to contribute is really important to get them all on board. So let's think about blogging for a minute. And, we've all done it, when blogging happened, I started a blog, I live on a farm, and I started a blog called Ponies and Jam. I actually, it's dormant now. It still sits there, but I'm just doing other stuff, and I haven't been doing it very much lately, but it still sits there. And I have a blog on my company website, which is an active content. So as an organisation, or even as an individual, you might decide that you might want to have a blog, and go for it, because it's fantastic. I mean, I love blogs. I have an RSS feed, and I follow, 70, 80 blogs. A lot of them are food blogs, healthy eating blogs, yoga blogs, all sorts of stuff. I'm telling you what I do, but that's just what I'm interested in. And so I love blogs, and I love that content that you can get from really good quality blogs. So go for it in terms of an individual, go for it in terms of as an organisation, but really making sure that you're doing it properly. And when I'm saying to people, thinking about it, the way we're communicating is so diffused and fragmented. It's an absolute ideal opportunity for you to develop your own voice personally or as an organisation. So, I've done some work with NCOS, for example, in recent months, and they're looking at doing, a sector-wide sort of platform. A lot of organisations, and you see news websites coming up all the time. The Conversation, Women's Agenda, really strong, platforms that are there, and there's no reason why as a sector you couldn't develop one, or as an organisation you couldn't develop one if you've got a big organisation. So having a think about what you can do, you can be effective with very little resourcing. All you need is a bit of time and a bit of hard work, and off you go. As I mentioned before, The Conversation, I think, is one of the great ones, but there's a whole lot of other ones. Women's Agenda, there's stacks of them that have come. Daily Life, a whole lot of ones that are out there now. So, I think they're ones that you can communicate through, but also they're really good examples about what you can do as a sector in terms of if you've got some resourcing behind you. So getting started in terms of blogging, I'm sure some of you have done that, but you can download some templates. A blog can be incorporated into existing website. You can keeping it really new and fresh, I think, is the key. It doesn't have to be costly, but you do need to have original content, and you need to decide how often you're going to upload content and who's going to take the lead in doing that. It's important not to just set and forget it. You need to keep it interesting to grow your audience. Blogging tips, the same as social media. Use video, pictures, and infographics to keep the site interesting. So if that's on your organisation's website, certainly think about doing that. Growing your audience, it's a combination of a whole lot of hard work, clever promotion, and really good content, and never give up. Really, is very fundamental. Tell people that your charity, has a blog via your newsletter and all the other ways that you communicate to people. Drive your, drive your traffic back to where you want to drive it by telling people about where you are. So just a word on campaign platforms, and I'm sure some of you have already gone here and looked at it. There's a really good platform called Nation Builder. that, President Obama's used. Obviously, he probably pays a lot more than people who've got 150 people in their organisation, but you could do it if you've got 150 people or if you've got, 200,000 people doing campaigns for you. So it's a great platform, and there are a couple of others, but this one's particularly very accessible and not very expensive to be able to, generate a local level grassroots campaign. So have a look at it. If it's something if that's sort of direction that's the sort of stuff that you do. Town Hall Social is another platform that's another great one it's one of sort of where you can engage and get your community to ask questions and engage with you in a more formal way, in a more, I suppose, a research-based way, a bit more scientific. So have a look at that as well. I'd suggest that to have an explore around those two sites. And before we get to questions, and I've got a couple that have come in there, and I'll get to them in a second. I can see a couple, but as I said before, don't let it take over, and occasionally disconnect to reconnect. There's a good woman that I saw last year at a conference who spoke about Social September, and we're in September now, and it's a whole thing where I think she told me about what they try to do is get people to go to dinner and put all their mobile phones in the middle of a table. I'm sure some of you have been to dinner and that's happened. So people don't actually look at their mobile phones as they're eating dinner. They're talking to each other instead. Isn't that sort of revolutionary? But it's a really good little campaign that she's running, and it's on again this year. This is the second year that she's doing it, so it's a really good one to have a look at. So let's just recap before we get on to questions. So social media, it's here to stay. You've got to get onto it and be part of the big picture, because, if you don't, you're really going to be, not irrelevant, but, you'll be in a backwater, and in a couple of years' time, you'll be going, yeah, we should have done it. We should have done it earlier. So grab hold of it and really embrace it. But be ethical about it and make sure that it reflects the culture and the values of your organisation or you as a person. I think that's really, really important. It's a relatively inexpensive way of communicating that will deliver huge, huge savings. So, it's free to do all these things pretty much. So, the only thing that you probably might need to pay for if you've got a number of platforms is a social media management system. There's a number of them: Hootsuite, MarketMe Suite, and there's a couple of them that are out there that are really good platforms. So you can just go onto them and put one tweet up, or just write a 140-word tweet, and it goes out to all of your platforms simultaneously. And that's what I do to save me time. So I'll shoot something out to 10 platforms or whatever it is at a time, all the LinkedIn groups, everything, all in sort of 1 minute, and it's a really effective way of utilising your time. That does cost you a little bit of money, but if you're as an organisation, you can probably afford $10, $20, $30 a month, and there's different platforms to have a look at. So have a look at MarketMe Suite and Hootsuite. There's a few others out there as well. Sorry, I just flick the page down. Take it on and empower staff with training and guidelines. So I think it's really important. And rather than just throwing it at them and going, okay, here's the book, read about it and just get going, try and help them a bit. And there's lots and lots of courses out there. There's lots of people that can help you. There's lots of stuff online just to read that you can read, rather than just expecting them to just get on with it. Help people along the way. Help yourself if you're doing it, I think is important as well. So spend a lot of time thinking about your tone and your message is really important before you get cracking. So, it needs to reflect your passion and your drive and what your organisation does. Don't be frightened about the risks, and don't let that stop you, being visionary about what you're doing and how you're going to communicate it. Because so often people are frightened of social media. They think something's going to go wrong. There's going to be trolls. There's going to be dodgy people. It'll be retweeted. Well, that's what you want. It's not scary. It's no more scary than anything else you do. So I think it's about embracing it and trying to bring people along for the ride on it as you go. And sometimes people are a bit faster at coming on the ride, and some people sort of stand on the sidelines for a bit, but depends on who it is you're working with in your board, etc. So estimate your investment and make sure that you've got clear investment objectives. It's very important that you do make sure that you've decided how much time and money you're going to put to this stuff and what the objectives are behind it. And tracking your tracking your achievements is great. I mean, Market Me Sweet and Sprout Social actually is a good one it's another social media management site platform. Sprout Social is a really good one to have a look at. They do really good tracking reports on your reach and where you've been retweeted and a whole lot of other stuff. So have a look at all of those in terms of, for tracking. So I'm just going to go to some questions now. I've got a question from Danielle. Potentially, if multiple people are responsible for the personality of an organisation, how do we make this work well? That is an issue. I mean, if you've got multiple people who are able to have access to the organisation's Twitter account or Facebook account, then you do need to agree on a tone, because if one person is absolutely ebullient and very bubbly and the other person is much more straight, then that will come out in the content. So, you need to think about that. So maybe it's about, week on, week off, or, so that you don't doubling up. You need to be talking, I suppose, about being clear about how those guidelines work, because ultimately you don't want to cross over. You don't want to have mixed messages is the most important thing. One person doesn't want to be saying something and then the next person responding to a question on Twitter that says the direct opposite to what was said 3 hours before. So I think it's about communication, and having those lines of communications really wide open is really, really important. So the next question, again from Danielle, was, if it's all about conversing with the audience, and how does an under-resourced comms department of a large organisation with many contributors manage this? So, well, I mean, everyone is under-resourced. I mean, that's the problem with not-for-profits. It's a perennial. It doesn't go away, and not-for-profits have their budget is always hard fought, and so it's very, very important to make sure that in terms of how do you manage your audience? Well, I think it's again about lines of communication within the team. So if you've got 1, 2, 3 people sitting down and saying, who are our audiences? Do a whiteboard session. Who are our audiences? Do a whiteboard session once a quarter is often a great thing to do. And say, who do we need to talk to? How important are they right now? Maybe it's 6 months before the next budget, and the most important thing is a budget bid. That's the most important thing. Maybe it's about a policy change that you're trying to influence. Maybe it's about a fundraising campaign. I don't know what it's going to be for you, but whatever it is, you need to have a think about the priorities. And so, you probably, if you are under-resourced, you can still, I think, communicate to all of your audiences. You just need to work out it strategically so you're doing it effectively. So, because multi-channel, this is the beauty of multi-channel platforms of communications, they're pretty easy to use. And so things like the social media management systems like Market Me Sweet, Sprout Social, et cetera, I think is, important to utilise. I think it's about being honest with each other. You know, you don't want to be working all day every day, but it's about thinking about what can you actually achieve, you know. And I think you can probably achieve quite a lot with multi-channel communications, and that's the beauty of it, which is fantastic. So one more question, one last question from Naomi. Do I have a favourite campaign on social media that jumps out at me? Look, there are a lot of them. I think I'm just trying to think of some that I've seen recently. I mean, I suppose, you know, Your Rights at Work was a great campaign. Some of the, you know, some of the groups like Plan International, Amnesty, some of those groups that are quite grassroots use social media really well. GetUp, I think one to look at. I would absolutely go and have a look at some of how GetUp uses social media. They use it really well. And not only, I mean, GetUp actually in many respects is a great model. They embrace other groups, they bring in other organisations then go out and proselytise on their behalf. So it's really, really important. I mean, it's a really good salient lesson actually, just to look at the fact that successful social media campaigns aren't just about your network. It's about increasing your network. It's about building those audiences one on top of the other. It's about starting with 3 blocks of, you know, Lego or wooden blocks and ending up with 632, you know, at the end of the 6 months. And it's about building those audiences one on top of the other. And it might just be transitory. It might not be forever, but it's about a moment in time when you're trying to achieve something or trying to do something. And I think a GetUp campaign is a particularly good one that does that really well. So if you're wanting to have a look at some good examples, I think that's probably a good place to start. So I think that's all. Oh no, there's another question. Danielle is saying rather it's managing all the comments and questions. Yes, I mean it is hard to do that, managing questions and comments on social media. And it's something that you need to do with good spirit, and you know sometimes it takes up time. So if there is something, there's a big campaign you're running and you're going to get a lot of comments and questions, have a roster of people who are going to be responsible for that, so that someone's not sitting there doing it day in, day out, and it's exhausting. So I think it is about making sure that that is shared with the team or as much as possible, so that one person isn't taking that responsibility on their shoulders. Now, I don't have any more questions. I do have a smiley face from Naomi, so thank you, Naomi. And I'll send you one back. I'd just like to thank everyone today for joining in. And it's been lovely to have you and being able to speak with you. A real privilege to have you joining us, which is thank you so much for that. We'll make the content, we'll send out actually a link to the content. We've been recording this, I hope the system tells me. So I will be sending you out a recording, an access to recording and also the slides. So you've got those. And if there's any other questions that spring to mind that you didn't get a chance to answer, don't hesitate, just shooting back an email. Happy to answer any questions that you've got. But thanks so much again for joining us today, and we'll let you know when we've got another one planned. But we're hoping to do these every couple of months at least in the future. So keep tuned to that, and we'll let you know when we've got another one scheduled. But thank you so much for your time today, and have a lovely day, and look forward to speaking with you all again. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.